obvious, we're going to record this webinar, so just let you know that. What I'm also going to ask you to do, it's Christine Dawson, past president of Seawell Canada. I'm your host for today's webinar. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. I'm going to ask that you please, if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the webinar chat. There's actually two places where in Zoom sometimes we see questions coming in. There's a questions a Q&A spot, and then there's a spot that's actually in the chat. And I would ask if you could just put them in the chat, that would be great, just to make sure that we don't lose track of them. If you could feel free to put your questions at any time, and we'll try to curate them a little bit for the end of the session, collate them and ask the most popular ones, and then we'll make sure that we send any of the other questions to the presenters so that they can, if they are able to, they can follow up with an answer offline. So again, please use the chat. Everyone has been muted, so we'll do that just to keep the sound quality the best possible, and I'll be muting myself once our presenter takes over. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jim Babcock. He's a project manager with Magnet, and he is going to be speaking with you today about how you are able to expand WIL opportunities for your students with Magnet's new student work placement program. Again, thank you, Jim, for taking the time to present this information to both Seawell members and non-members. Again, it's being recorded. Please feel free to put your chat questions in the chat box, and we will get to as many of those as possible. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Jim. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Christine, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm also joined by our Executive Director at Magnet, Mark Patterson, and our COO, Rylan Kinnan, as well as our colleagues from Orbis Communications, Natalie and Nitsopoulos, who will be quarterbacking a portion of this presentation when we get closer to the end. So as Christine had mentioned, we're here today to talk about the Magnet Student Work Placement Program. I want to give you a quick overview of our agenda for today, so you get a sense of what we're going to go over before we get into our Q&A. So for most of you, you're likely familiar with the Student Work Placement Program in one way or another, but I want to go over that at a high level just so everyone is up to speed for those who may not know about the program. The criteria for the program funding, a little bit about the Magnet Student Work Placement Program and how it complements other programs that have been running over the last number of years through other student work placement program delivery partners. I'll probably refer to that as SWPP moving forward just to save a little time. The fourth point there is participating in the Magnet SWPP program. So how, as a post-secondary school administrator or educator, how can you get involved and empower your students and employers to participate in the program? Before we get into the Q&A, we want to introduce OutcomeCampus Connect, which is a work-integrated learning ecosystem funded by Employment and Social Development Canada that is part of the expanded SWPP program. Will be launching in January with some new exciting functionality. And Natalie, as I mentioned, Natalie Nitsopoulos from Orbis Communications is here to join me to speak to that. So jumping into the Student Work Placement Program, this is an initiative funded by Employment and Social Development Canada. And its goal is to support employers and students across Canada in accessing work-integrated learning placements. There's been a lot of research showing that students who are accessing these type of placements during their academics are more successful after they graduate. And so in that vein, the program is designed to boost the number of those placements that are happening across Canada. The program originally launched, I believe, was in 2017 with a number of delivery partners and was recently expanded to include a number, to launch the program into other disciplines, not only STEM, but including non-STEM, and ensuring that work placements are distributed across provinces and regions all across Canada, increasing the number of students from quote-unquote non-traditional programs receiving these placements. And that really means non-traditional being outside of those programs that typically engage in work-integrated learning, including co-op and internships, and trying to branch out and engage students that are in other programs. And finally increasing the number of students accessing work integrated learning experiences that identify as belonging to one or more of the underrepresented groups, which I will mention in my next slide here, I believe. Yeah, so the program's main driver, the main incentive for employers and for post-secondary schools is a wage subsidy to promote the creation of new work integrated learning placements. The idea being that an employer with a wage subsidy this year might be able to hire 1, 2, 5, 10 extra students than they would have in the previous year. So the subsidy itself is has two different funding streams. The first is an employer can receive up to 50% to a maximum of $5,000 for wages paid to a student in a qualified placement. And the second being if a student is identifies as belonging to one of these underrepresented groups, which at the bottom here I have listed, including women in STEM, Indigenous students, new immigrants to Canada, persons with disabilities, and first-year students as well. So students that do identify as one of those groups and are qualified under the student work placement program, employers would receive up to 70% of the wages, or to a maximum of $7,000 for those placements. The funding is administered, as I mentioned, by a number of delivery partners, of which Magnet is now one as part of this expanded program. Others that you may have worked with in the past include ITAC, EcoCanada, BioTalent Canada, and yeah, so I'll move on to criteria for program funding here. So there are a number of criteria for a placement to be eligible. But a high level as an employer to be eligible for the program, they have to be registered as a Canadian business or nonprofit. The student has to be registered at a post-secondary institution as a domestic student, so international students do not qualify. Compensation must be paid to the student for the duration of the term. And what that really, it's up there is just to make sure that employers understand that they're able to fund the position and receive a reimbursement as part of the subsidy on the back end. The placement must offer a meaningful work integrated learning component. So this is something that in the expansion of the program and trying to branch out and include more students across Canada, we're going to be working closely with Employment and Social Development Canada, ESDC, to figure out really what qualifies as a meaningful work integrated learning component, what can that look like in a number of different settings to engage and make sure that the program is as wide-reaching as it's meant to be. And finally, the placement has to be a net new placement compared to the previous year. So this is what I had mentioned a moment ago, was that the program is designed to encourage employers to hire more students than they could have otherwise. And for a full list of program requirements, you can visit SWPP.magnet.today to get a list of those for both employers, students, and the placement. But those are the high-level points there that I've included here. So a little bit more about the Magnet Student Work Placement Program. Our program is designed to be complementary to other funded delivery partners. So as I mentioned, ITAC, BioTalent Canada, EcoCanada, EHRC, etc., have been running their own programs for a number of years now and work in specific industries, themselves overlapping in some areas. But we want to make sure that Magnet is offering placements that are complementary. So we want to aim our efforts at placements that don't naturally lie with other SWPP delivery partners. And that involves working with schools that might not have been engaged previously, looking to new industries and other avenues where the program hasn't seen as much representation. And finally, we've designed ours to support a diverse range of students from a number of programs across Canada. So as part of this expanded program, as ESDC has launched just this term, previously under the previous program, only STEM students, science, technology, engineering, math students were eligible. And the expanded program now includes non-STEM, including business, social sciences, arts, humanities. So Magnet is really going to be working hard to be representing the program in those areas as well. To get as a school to be participating in the Magnet SWPP program, there's a number of different ways to get involved. Our program and website is at SWPP.magnet.today. Employer applications are being accepted still for fall 2019. As part of ramping up the expanded program, there are still a number of funds available for this term. And employers can apply via the website swip.magnet.today, or which will lead them directly to the application process, the second bullet here listed. And for more information, you can reach out to myself or one of my colleagues here at swip@magnet.today to learn more about how your school might engage, particularly if you do have questions or if you've been participating with other delivery partners. It would be great to connect with you and talk about how we can work together to increase the number of SWPP placements at your school while complementing the work that you've been doing previously. And I think the last point I'll add there is that as we are still prioritizing and accepting fall placements, we will be accepting winter 2020 applications later in November as we work to just close out this term. And I think we got a number of questions here, but before we get into our questions, I'm going to invite my colleague at Orbis Communications, Natalie Nitsopoulos, to talk a little bit about OutcomeCampus Connect, which is, as I mentioned, a work integrated learning ecosystem being developed by Orbis and Magnet, funded by Employment and Social Development Canada. As we thought it would be a great time, an opportune moment to talk about the platform itself, and as well as how it will support the SWPP program in the future. So, Christine, I think, or Natalie, do we have you on the line, Natalie?
I'm wondering if Natalie, I had trouble unmuting myself, so she may be in mute mode, possibly.
Hi, it's Mark here from CWIL. I've been Natalie's audio currently isn't connected, so I can't unmute her. I did message her in the chat, and it's I guess Natalie, you can't hear this. So we're just working on getting her audio connected. So just 1 minute.
So Jim, do you want to take a couple of questions while we wait for Natalie to join us? Would that make sense if there's a few questions that are specific to your presentation so far?
Certainly.
Okay, so why don't we do that? Okay, so there was a question that came in regarding whether visible minorities are considered under the underrepresented groups. Could you speak to that question?
Yes, for this program specifically, the underrepresented groups do not include visible minorities. So they are women in STEM, Indigenous students, persons with disabilities, first-year students, and I believe there was one more, newcomers to Canada, new immigrants to Canada within the last 5 years.
Okay, thank you. One of the questions was if there have been any press or media releases that have gone out, and I know with the recent election there was, some limitations on what could be shared in that format. So, are you able to speak to maybe your communication plan, broader communication plan, which of course this webinar and communication with CWIL members is a part?
Yeah, so there hasn't been any wide releases or media. We are currently pending approval from ESDC on those actions following the election.
Okay, so as soon as you're able to, you could expect that there may be some more formal communications regarding the program.
Certainly, yes. We do have a communications plan built out, which includes those releases, but yes. So yes, you can expect in the future as soon as we receive that approval.
All right, sorry to interrupt. I think we should have Natalie on the line now. Natalie, can you hear us?
Can everyone hear me?
There's a lot of background noise with someone's call, so if there's someone on the call that could go to mute, that would be great.
Christine, can you hear me? This is Natalie.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Perfect. Okay.
Hi, Natalie. So I've just introduced you, and this is Jim here. Hi, and the Outcome Campus Connect platform. Just giving a brief overview of what you'll be sharing today in relation to the program and how it will support SWPP. So I've got the presentation. I've got control here. I'll just be clicking through as you go. And just for everyone's benefit, Natalie Natsopoulos, again, from Orbis Communications, director of the program over there, has an extensive knowledge of not only the platform, but I'm sure in the post-secondary education world, and I'm sure has a number of relationships with many of you on the call. So Natalie, I'll hand it over to you to wrap up the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim, and thank you for that warm welcome. And hi, everyone on the call. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to kind of sit down and run through this. I'll try and be as much information as possible in a short amount of time so that you guys have an understanding of Outcome Campus Connect and how the partnership between Orbis and Magnet has come together. So we originally launched Outcome Campus Connect about a year ago now to bridge with the ESDC, Magnet's industry, along with Orbis's post-secondary touch points. So it was to build in that original link, but with the expansion that Jim mentioned earlier with the ESDC and the SWPP program, the new what we're calling Outcome Campus Connect 2.0 is essentially bridging that is accessible as a nationwide platform now. So it's available to all students, all schools, and all employers across Canada. So what you're seeing here is that initial investment from the ESDC was bridging the two, but really from an expansion standpoint, it's growing this network to not only support what Jim's doing today in the Magnet with the SWPP application, but also kind of provide a more holistic view of the WILL ecosystem across Canada, and to see how this funding is working through, and ultimately to grow the number of work-integrated learning opportunities for post-secondary and students, post-secondary institutions and students. So we're working to create that, and really at the end of the day, what we're trying to work within this network is leveraging the concept of interoperability and enabling strategic partnerships to really empower the students today and providing them with what kind of success they need for tomorrow. So that's kind of the vision behind the Outcome Campus Connect network and where we're going with it. The next portion of what we're doing from Orbis's standpoint, leading up to the launch of Outcome Campus Connect 2.0, is what you're seeing here is that's all access to students, employers, and post-secondary institutions. So it requires that schools have the option to either register on Outcome Campus Connect, or they can choose to not register. So if you are a registered school on Outcome Campus Connect, there's really two elements of what that means. So a registered school would either have access through API, which is an application protocol interface, where the opportunities that come through from an employer that are targeting your institution would come through this API feed. And if you are using Orbis as a technology solution within your institution, they would come directly through your Orbis installation. If you have another technology provider or you are a homegrown solution, then you will also have access to the API key in which you can install within your own technology provider and have those opportunities fed directly into that technology solution. If you do not have a technology solution at your institution, we also support the ability that if you register with Outcome Campus Connect, that we will provide you with a branded page for your institution that you can provide for your students to access directly through, and they can go through that link, and you'll also have the access to all the same features and benefits of a registered Outcome Campus Connect school. For a non-registered Outcome Campus Connect School that provides the ability of a student still having access that they could come to the Outcome Campus Connect site and register. But for a non-registered school, they would have any of the reporting feed information be directly as requested from the ESDC. As a registered school, the other thing that we're going to be working with all of our institutions over the next couple months is essentially mapping back the WIL opportunities that you provide at an institution, as well as the fields or identifying that not all WIL types are offered at every institution. And again, we've adopted, with Outcome Campus Connect, we adopted the CWIL definitions. So that is what is listed within Outcome Campus Connect. So we'll work with you to see what WIL types you provide, whether that's a co-op, an internship, an apprenticeship, et cetera, and the types of programs that map back to that. So that the opportunities coming to your institution are not just general opportunities, but are employers that are curated to your particular institution, so that they're targeting what you offer as an institution, and then your students can successfully apply for that. The other key benefit from a registered school, you'll see here on this page, is that we support an aggregate reporting dashboard of your student involvement. So you'll be able to see the total number of opportunities targeted to your school, the number of students for the SWPP funded, the number of organizations that have hired a student as an aggregation. If you want more detailed reporting, that will require a data sharing agreement with Outcome Campus Connect. So we'll work with your particular institution in creating that data sharing agreement. But that will give you more detailed information of your students and the employers targeting your institutions. It wouldn't be across the board. It would, again, just be your institutional data. And then if you are interested or you have any more questions, please feel free to contact me here. You've got my email address. I'd be more than happy to provide any additional information. Back to you now, Jim.
Thanks, Natalie. Appreciate that. I just want to add a note there. I think I saw questions there somewhere. Is how will this fit sort of in the SWPP ecosystem in the future, as this is a technology that we're developing now, and we plan to be working very closely with all of the schools and industry associations that are currently administering the program to make sure that we're building out something that's going to work for everyone to their benefit, and really as a collaborative effort over and above sort of just building something out in a silo.
Thank you, Jim and Natalie. Maybe I could start to ask you some of the questions that have been coming in. And if I could start with one that came in regarding the platform, and wondering if it is available in French. And I know the answer that it is fully bilingual, but I'll let you speak to that as well. And also wanted to let any participants know that we will be able to offer either a webinar in French or record a video for distribution. So wanted to make sure those on the line that would prefer to have this presentation in French, that we will make sure that something is available.
Thanks, Christine. Yes, the platform is available in French. There are translated pieces across the entire system to allow for bilingual use of the platform. And it does act similar to most other platforms where you have user-generated content that may be presented in English, and that's because a user has uploaded that, for example, on their resume. And so you'll find that it functions similar to other platforms with that regard.
Okay, so now I'm going to jump into some of the questions that have been coming in throughout the presentation. So one of the first ones is around the timeline for accepting applications for the winter work term. And the question is, I guess, encouraging applications to be available before late November so that employers can make hiring decisions now a little bit earlier in the term.
Certainly, yeah, and I think we're really driving to make that available as soon as possible. With the program having been released sort of or expanded sort of midterm, we are really working to prioritize fall processing currently. But I can assure you that I'm going to push here on this end to make that available as soon as possible, and could circle back, I think, Christine, with you and folks there to maybe make an announcement or reach out. But certainly any of those that are looking to and anxious to get involved on winter, you can always circle back in the next week or so, as we'll be updating our page when that becomes available.
Okay, great. Can you provide some examples of the types or sectors and organizations that you'll be targeting as your SWPP program?
Yeah, so there are, with the existing industry association delivery partners, I think there's 7 or 8 of them. We're going to be, we have already sort of mapped out where naturally their placements and their efforts have fallen. And we're going to be trying to fill the gaps wherever they aren't sort of already working out and expanding their network. So that includes things like manufacturing, for example. We're really sort of right now doing a holistic review of all the opportunities and where we see we strategically fit best. But we certainly do encourage applications from all employers and promotion from schools, really from all programs. Is the goal of the program is to reach as many students as possible across Canada.
Great. I have a question asking if back-to-back work terms can be funded. So for example, 2 4-month work terms, so it's students working for 8 months, would they be able to apply for funding for both winter 2020 and then again for summer 2020?
I think with, I'd have to confirm with Employment Social Development Canada. I think if it's the same student, there might be an issue with receiving funding on that second term, but that's certainly something I can follow up with after the call today.
Okay, great. There's a question about whether, so I might ask for the individual who wrote the question to provide a little bit of clarification, but they're asking if non-funded employers can also post WIL opportunities on OutcomeCampus Connect. So if I understand the question correctly, they're asking even if someone is not seeking funding, can they still post opportunities through the platform?
Yes, certainly. And I'll maybe make mention that OutcomeCampus Connect formed last year as a pilot with some funding from ESDC, and currently does exist in a sort of a basic form that allows employers across Canada to distribute job postings to Orbis schools that are engaged on the platform. So it is currently, if you go to magnet.today, you can sign up as an employer and you can distribute your posting today, whether or not you're looking for funding through the SWPP program or another program. You can still make that recruitment, use it as a recruitment tool for free. And the goal and the vision in the future is that the platform itself will support and streamline the accessibility to funds for employers, sort of housing a recruitment and program funding under one roof.
Okay, the next question that's come in, I'm going to ask you, Jim, to maybe draw your attention to the chat box. And there's a web link that someone has provided. And they're asking you to potentially be able to walk folks through the application form. Are you able to see the link that's been posted in the chat box, Jim?
I'm seeing a number of, oh, there we go. Yeah, so I can pull up that really quickly just to give the high-level overview. So we've had a number, we've just transitioned everything recently. And so should be able to get in. Here we go. So as a high-level overview, the application has a number of stages, which we've modeled in working with the other industry associations and ESDC to streamline the process and make sure that we're meeting program requirements but also respecting the privacy and data concerns of all those involved. So you'll see the first stage is from an employer to be providing their confirmation of the privacy statement, the fact that the data they're providing will be used for the program, et cetera. Completing an eligibility quiz to make sure that they are in fact eligible for the program, and to sort of triage them to connect with us if they don't seem to meet those criteria, so that we can avoid them going down and spending all of their time on what is the biggest piece of the application, step number 3 here, and submitting all the information about the organization, about the placement, et cetera. Followed by getting the student involved. So the student has to provide themselves some information about their school, et cetera, and also some other information specifically about identifying as an underrepresented group. And after those are completed, we move to an initial review of the application to make sure that the employer is legitimate, the placement's legitimate, they meet the criteria, et cetera. At which point, if we do approve them conditionally, they would go on to complete a number of other supporting documentation pieces, including an employer placement agreement, providing proof that the placement has started, so first pay stub, information about how they'd like to receive the subsidy, and then finally, at the end of the term, a final pay stub to allow us to calculate how much the placement would be funded. And then we complete a final review, at which point, if everything pans out as expected, then we would then send over to processing the wage subsidy at that point. So that's the high-level overview of the process itself. And as I mentioned, it's very similar to sort of how many of the other program providers have been operating over the last 2 years in working with a number of schools.
Okay, thanks, Jim. We've got a few more questions coming in. The first one is, when will post-secondary institutions be able to go on Campus Connect and create a profile to target positions related to our academic programs?
So that's,
that's for Natalie. Yes.
It is.
Sorry, I can jump in on that one. So we are starting to outreach that if you are interested in registering on OutcomeCampus Connect, you can email me directly, and I'll work with each institution as to how that looks for the OutcomeCampus Connect kind of 2.0, and we can kind of work from there. But as of mid-November, we will also be working with a link in which we can provide out in a package of materials if the school wishes to go directly to a link to register. But if they're interested in registering right now, please do email me.
Okay, thank you. We've got another question around if an employer has provincial funding, not a tax credit, are they allowed to also tap into the SWPP funding? So understanding that funding from 2 different SWPP partners would not be allowed. But if there was other provincial funding in place, how would they still be eligible?
So the answer is yes, but only for the portion. They'd only be eligible to receive subsidies for the portion that are non-governmental funds. So as an example, if they currently have a student with a placement and they're being funded for 50% under provincial funding, they would be eligible for, provided they meet all of the other criteria, be eligible for up to 50% of the 50% that they are paying out of pocket. So that would be a total of 25% when you're looking at the total wages of the student. So the answer is yes, but it does, it's only for non-governmental sources of funding.
Someone has asked for some examples of arts and humanities positions that might qualify.
So this is one of the interesting parts of the program and the expansion, in that we're really going to be working with schools and with employers and industry associations to figure out what does that look like and how can we make best use of the program to support what industry is looking for in the real world. So we're not quite sure exactly what that will look like, but we're sure there's going to be a lot of exciting opportunities as we start to launch formally and get out there publicly. You know, students that get wind of the program and you know, creating positions in arts and sciences and humanities that haven't been, historically available. So it's certainly something we don't have our finger on quite yet, but it's an exciting time.
We've got another question around timelines. I think you've had to kind of launch your new SWPP program quite quickly, and as we all know, we're in the middle of the fall term and heading very quickly into the winter term. And the question is around the timeline for approval of funding decisions. That your website indicates 2 to 4 weeks for a funding decision. If the employer already has a student in place, is it possible for this timeline to be processed more quickly?
Yeah, so we're going to be triaging every application as they come in, and have sort of, this being our first year, are really just looking to make sure that we set expectations and provide enough time to process applications as they come in, as we sort of do expect quite a number out the gate. So I think the answer is yes, we're going to be working to expedite every application that comes in as it lands on our desk. But certainly, depending on the engagement in the program and how vast that is, we wouldn't be able to commit to, say, a shorter time frame. But we will be working to process all as soon as possible and not waiting 2 weeks to start reviewing.
Great. I'm wondering if you maybe are able to kind of walk folks through this next question again. So in terms of the application process for the student, the question is it correct that the student doesn't apply for the work term on the OutcomeCampus Connect platform, that the student is redirected to the employer website or the wrong recruitment platform? So maybe you could walk, as you walked us through the employer process, maybe just through the student process a little bit.
Certainly. So the program currently, the Magnet Student Work Placement Program, exists and operates outside of any technology platform. So that includes outside of OutcomeCampus Connect. Employers that find students through any other means of recruitment are able to apply and be eligible for the program. It's only in the future that we hope to expand the program, the OutcomeCampus Connect platform, to allow employers to recruit and access funding under that roof. But it's still at that point, because of the program itself is designed to provide access to all students across Canada. Regardless of how you hired the student, you would still be able to apply for and access the funding should you meet the criteria.
Okay. Will SWPP funding be available for nonprofit organizations?
Yes, they will, provided they're a registered nonprofit. They are eligible similarly to their private business counterparts.
Okay. With an agreement in place, I think this question may be for Natalie. I believe what they're asking about is a data sharing agreement in place. What type of detailed student information will be available?
Yep, so with a data sharing agreement in place, you would have more information about these students that have applied or have secured a work term through OutcomeCampus Connect within your institution. So just more detailed information on the student or the employer. Without the data sharing agreement, it's just aggregate data.
So Natalie, you mean the actual name of the student and the name
exactly.
of the employer that they were hired with would actually be available with a data sharing agreement, but would not be available without one, correct?
Yes, yes, and just to make sure it's understood that it's your student information, there would be no other institutional or other shared information.
Okay. Many employers are hiring now for co-op work terms that start in May. When will they be able to apply for funding?
Yeah, so we expect to launch, sort of looking forward for the next 3 terms, alongside with our winter 2020. So understanding that we are, we sort of launched mid-cycle here, and a lot of the 2020 placements have been recruited and hired for. We're going to launch that as soon as we can, and shortly after that, certainly before January and before December, ideally, we'll be launching applications for spring 2020 and spring-summer term.
Okay. Question is, can agriculture industries apply?
Yes, so the program is open to any industry and sector, provided they meet the eligibility criteria. But certainly, and that's great. We're Magnet specifically, we're really hoping to engage in a number of industries that haven't traditionally been represented with the program. And as part of the expanded initiative with ESDC this year, that's really opened up the doors and allowed for funding for all sectors.
So this is another question around communicating about the program. So we talked earlier about when you would be able to kind of share, media releases and that type of thing. And the question is, do you have flyers available or promotional materials that we can send, that participants can send to employers and students to share information about the program?
So we've currently, we've launched our website there with the application process, and we are building out sort of what the rest of the communications and marketing materials will look like. I would encourage anyone to reach out to me directly to see what would be best for them to work with, as we're going to try and be flexible and working with all our partners to make sure we can roll out the program as seamlessly as possible. But for right now, we have our online promotional materials available.
Jim, maybe you could move the slide back that has your contact information, so that folks, in case they didn't catch that you're able to get that information.
Certainly.
And while you're doing that, I'll ask the next question, which is there a minimum number of hours that students need to complete in order to qualify?
No, there isn't a minimum number of hours, and the duration of the placement is flexible as well. Employment and Social Development Canada has really emphasized sort of expanding the program into more non-traditional WIL experiences, and that includes, part-time positions, part-time students, and are really going to work to be flexible in how we're doling out the funding. So that rolls down to us, and we'll consider that with each application, but there are no strict requirements there.
Does the student have to be a WIL student to participate?
This is one of those things that with the expanded program we're looking to address with the ESDC. We've got a number of ideas of how we could be engaging non-WIL students that, as you see them today, the idea being that we can work not only in the existing spaces, but engage students in the arts and sciences, humanities, et cetera, that don't fall under those traditional categories currently.
Is there any restriction on the size of the organization? For example, the number of employees?
And sorry, on that last point there, I want to mention as well, we'll be working closely with the schools as sort of the gatekeeper and the sort of the expertise holders here in this area. We, as a delivery partner, want to make sure that the program is working for everyone, for students as well as for post-secondary schools and employers. So we're flexible in how that's going to roll out, but the requirement of the program is that there be a meaningful WIL experience, and how that sort of plays out will be sort of told on how we work with partners and figure that out together. Sorry, Christine, I missed the last question there as I interrupted you.
The question was, is there any restriction on the size of organization, for example, the number of employees?
No, there isn't. The requirement is that they be a registered business. So that could be a sole proprietor of one, or it could be a corporation of thousands.
Okay. Can you provide some additional clarification on what meeting the qualifications criteria means? It's quite open and could be open to interpretation for many employers. So can you provide some clarification so that we don't misrepresent eligibility to our employers?
Certainly, yeah. And I know that with the time we had today and some of the complexities of the program, I shared today the high level sort of main criteria. But if you do go to the website, SWPP.magnet.today, you'll see a breakdown of the eligibility criteria for the employer, for the student, and for the placement as well. So that could be used as a resource when you're reaching out to employers to let them know If you are working with an employer and they meet most of the criteria, you could say, hey, I think this would be a great program for you. You seem to meet the criteria, and direct them to that link, encouraging them to review the criteria themselves. And in all cases where we want to be expanding this program across Canada and making it work for everyone that wants to be involved. And so if there is anything that comes up that is, you need clarification on, I'd say feel free to reach out to us and we'll connect with you to make any clarifications.
Okay, we've got a couple questions here that I think go together and maybe directed at Natalie. Maybe asking a little bit about the advantages for institutions who do already have work-term posting boards. Maybe could talk about the advantage of the OutcomeCampus Connect platform, and maybe talking a little bit about those processes. If, for example, if they want to post on their own platform an opportunity they found on OutcomeCampus Connect, would they need to inform the employer of doing that? I guess, so questions around that process, the process of sharing the information if they're using another platform.
Yep, so I can jump in on that one. So I guess one of the key benefits that we see for an institution that may already have obviously a full co-op or a process in which they already have a separate managing system is that the OutcomeCampus Connect network currently supports the recruitment and reporting concepts, so that yes, it becomes more of a one-stop shop should an employer wish to target multiple institutions either across Canada or in certain provinces or regions with that one posting opportunity. But really where we see the benefits and the expansion of this network is going beyond really bridging the experiential learning and skill development opportunities for students, potentially where employers may not have had the access or the opportunity or the knowledge that certain institutions offered various will opportunities at those particular institutions. So it becomes more of a opportunity to also say that there are a vast majority of institutions across Canada that are providing a phenomenal job for students, but that employers might not necessarily have that awareness. So providing that awareness for them to be able to recruit talent. But one of the additional movements that we have in the 2.0 version is that we're also supporting the ability of having curated content as an option to come through the Campus Connect feed. So as an institution, you will have the option to turn on or off this concept of a curated content. So in OutcomeCampus Connect in the 2.0 version, we have the Future Skills Center, which if some of you might not be aware, it's a forward-thinking center of research that has the employment success and preparation for really employment for all of Canada. And that content will be coming through, again, the Campus Connect. So it's the ability to also have content directly into your institution, whether that's through your own technology provider, your own managing solution, or Orbis, that's available for your students so that they have that content portion as well. So we really do see it as an expansion and given that, again, that kind of that idea of that holistic will across Canada.
A couple of more quick questions as we're drawing into the last 10 minutes of our time together. Do international students qualify for the SWPP program?
No, international students do not qualify.
And can university or college staff or professors apply for the funding?
This is a question that I think I go back to the funding from governmental sources. We're going to be taking each application case-by-case basis, but there's certainly some instances where they would qualify, and that would be, as an example, perhaps at a university where they would have a registered nonprofit as part of a social innovation hub, or an organization that is sort of arm's length from the university but still linked. In that sort of circumstance where funding is coming from non-governmental sources, they may be eligible. I certainly wouldn't discourage anyone from applying, but in a case like that, there could be a case for funding, certainly.
Okay, but for a university staff or professor to apply for funding for someone to work within the institution would not be eligible, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. That may be all of the questions that were posed to us. Does anyone have any, if you have any final questions, type quickly into the chat box, and we will try to get them answered. Otherwise, it looks like that maybe you may have been able to answer all the questions for those on the call. So thank you very much to Jim and to Natalie for taking time to speak with our CWIL members and guests today. Oh, we have one more that's just come in. I believe the question was already asked and answered though. So thank you very much. We really appreciate your time. Again, this session has been recorded, and we will offer it in French if there is demand. So we will, if there is anyone on the call that would like to have this webinar repeated in French, and we'll send out an email to membership to ask that question as well, so that we can share this information with our colleagues who would prefer to have the information provided in our other official language. So thank you very much once again for participating. Have a great day, and you now have 7 minutes of time back in your lives. Have a great Monday.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you.